everyone is going to be available. So we will get started. So just very briefly, I know some of you have been on before, but for those of you who haven't, welcome to the Bridge Club. We are really excited to have everybody here today, and so excited that the fabulous Dani McVety has agreed to be our host for today. So thank you, Dani. We appreciate that. For those of you who haven't heard the story, just real quick, Catherine Haskins and me, Catherine and I, formed the Bridge Club because we really wanted to bring back some inspiration, some connection, and some real authentic conversation to the veterinary profession. So that is what we are attempting to do here. It's kind of a TED Talks meets LinkedIn, plus a little bit of that old-fashioned book club, or a Bridge Club, or book club where you say you go read the book, but you really don't. So we're just happy to bring everybody together to have a good time. So you might have noticed as you were dialing in a couple of little rules of engagement at the front. Basically, the session's being recorded. We do want to hear from you, but please stay on mute until you're ready to speak so we don't get background distractions. Turn your video cameras on. It looks like almost everybody has done that. Yay. So we can engage each other. And if you haven't already done so, go to the upper right-hand corner and you'll find a gallery view. And if you do that, your face will not be giant. You'll be the same size as everybody else so you can see the entire community. That's an important fact we've discovered. So now grab your beverage. That is a prerequisite for belonging to the Bridge Club. And I would like to introduce Dr. Dani McVety, our host for today. Dani, take it away.
All right, thank you, Mike and Sandra and Deborah and Brian and Karen. Hopefully you can join us here too. Thank you guys so much. I want to start this toast off with of course a cheers, but certainly another oath as well. So yeah, like good apple juice there too. So this body language is the first body language lecture I ever went to. This is how they started off the lecture as well. And she said, everyone raise your right hand. So we're going to raise our hands with our wine in it instead. And we're going to promise to not use any of this information, okay, on any of our loved ones or our spouses or anybody in a negative fashion. So, you know, part of body language is not mind reading, but it's actually just reading, you know, reading certain intonations and reading certain patterns with people. So here's to promising not to use this information in a bad way against loved ones. And of course, hopefully gaining better relationships with everybody in the process. Cheers. I was taught in Ireland that you're supposed to look everybody in the eye, you know, when cheersing, like you're not supposed to like not look somebody in the eye. So now I get to do this in a very efficient way. Okay, so I'll start with just a couple minutes of kind of my background. But I graduated veterinary school in 2009, University of Florida. And I jokingly say, but this is such a huge part of who I am, that I graduated in the part of the class that makes the top 90% possible. Okay, so I graduated in the bottom of the class. But what that did for me was that, and I knew that I was, but I actually failed a class in school. So I spent more time in veterinary school than most people did. It was nutrition at that, hence wine right now. But the reason why that became important to me is because I realized that when I was in emergency medicine, when I graduated in emergency, that I wanted people to walk out of that exam room door feeling like they trust me. And I felt that that was more important than it was to have them feel like they knew exactly what was going on with the disease process. So the moment that I realized that, it was such a relief for me as a doctor, especially as a new doctor, because I didn't feel this all of a sudden this necessity, you know, to explain diabetes and to explain, you know, Cushing's and all these separate diseases. I felt like, okay, if I can say, I'm not really sure, let's look that up, or I'm not really sure, I'll ask somebody, or I know this is a big concern for you right now, but let that be my concern. And then, you know, we'll take it from there. And that had people leaving like they trusted me instead of understanding every process. But in that became this desire for myself to just kind of look into communication tactics and how's it different. And this one particular day, I'll give you an example. So one particular day, this gentleman came into the emergency room that I was working at, and he was known, and I mean known, for being the difficult guy. And of course, he was coming into an emergency room because all the other GPs in the area actually had fired him. So he wasn't almost, you know, welcome in any of the other GPs. So this guy came in, and of course the technician starts, you know, snarking and laughing, and they're like, let's have Dr. Dani go take this one. So they had me go in, and I already knew, I'd heard the backstories, I'd heard everything about this guy. So as soon as I walked in, he was sitting in this one particular chair, and I'm like, oh my gosh, listen, Mr. Smith, I am so sorry. If you wouldn't mind, can you sit in this chair right here? Because this one has a really bad leg. I'm really worried about this tipping over on you, you know, and that you're going to fall down. And so would you mind sitting in this chair instead? Immediately he got up, he sat down in the next one, and I'm telling you, I never had a problem. And when he came in, you know, to this emergency room with his little Aussie, every single time he asked for me. But it was interesting because at the time, and I was just literally a month or two out of school, but at this point, that I realized that, okay, I'm doing something just a little bit different, and I'm not smarter, that's for sure. So why are the technicians grabbing me for all these difficult cases? Why am I the one, you know, getting grabbed for the euthanasia? Why am I the one getting called in? Literally, when my clinician wasn't able to you know, talk somebody in or out of a treatment, she said, Dani, go talk to him. It's one of the smartest doctors I've ever met. And she would have me go talk to somebody if she couldn't get, you know, to a final judgment with somebody. So I decided to, you know, to kind of just dive into this communication stuff. And body language was something that really interested me, maybe because I was a ballroom dancer when I was in school. So learning how to work my body in a way that had people react in a certain way is certainly part of ballroom dancing, and learning how to do that. So I started like taking these courses, and it's just thrown me into this most amazing, you know, kind of learning about community. Wise, about 3 months out of school, I started Lap of Love Veterinary Hospice, and we do in-home end-of-life care. So I would walk into people's homes that are complete strangers. They've never met me before. They've maybe talked to me once or twice on the phone, and I have to walk into their home, into their space, and I have to, you know, kill their best friend. I mean, that's their view of what I'm doing. Of course, you know, ours is saying goodbye to somebody in a most compassionate, loving, end-of-life way. So that also got me thinking, okay, how am I doing? You know, what am I doing differently than somebody else? So, you know, and of course I want you guys all to feel very comfortable to raise your hand and ask a question at any time. But what I want to do, and what I was kind of thinking about when going through this process with Catherine and Brenda, was why don't we go from the top down? You know, why don't we just give these real short cliff note versions of what are some body language techniques? What are some little things that we can pay attention to that are going to help us all improve the relationships that we have, and maybe find some other better ways of you know, finding deeper connections with people. So one of the first things that I found really important, and especially that I coach veterinary students through, is eye contact. You know, we're always taught that solid eye contact is extremely important, and generally the studies say around 60% of the time it's important to have that you know, eye contact. One of the things that that millennials have kind of started doing is not making eye contact when they're talking. So it's a very common thing. It's easier for us to make eye contact with somebody when we're listening, but it's much harder to do it when we're talking. So that's a very important little part. But it's also what you're doing when you're not making eye contact, and when you're breaking it as well. So many times, you know, especially the younger generation will break eye contact down. So if I'm talking to a client, I'm explaining the process that we're going to do. Maybe we're going to do surgery, or we're going to do some blood work first, and then I'm going to take a moment and break eye contact down. You know, that has a much different feeling to somebody than I'm talking about surgery. I'm talking about the blood work that we want to run, and there's a couple of different tests, and I would really like to know the answers to this test. And you know, what that's going to do is that's going to show me a couple of things. So if you see, I broke eye contact up. So doing that is a nice little technique for everybody. But also, you know, to remember that 60%, it should not be taken, we shouldn't be erring on the side of too much either, because there's one study that I read a while ago that said used car salesmen and judges and attorneys actually have a very intense, more consistent eye contact, upwards of 70 to 80%. So if we're doing it too much, it can be very, very, very disheartening to some people. But of course, I don't think that's a common problem in our introverted veterinary space, but it is something to, of course, pay attention to, because sometimes people will, there's so much thinking about eye contact that they end up doing like this to people. It's very scary. You just stare at somebody like that. So making sure that there is breaking of the eye contact, that normal, you know, flowing in and out, and also learning how to make eye contact when you're talking to somebody. So the next thing is hand gestures. So even at the beginning, of course, I'm noticing this about myself, but at the beginning when I first started talking, I went like this a couple of times. Now, it's not something that you want to do, like my nose legitimately was itching, but it's not something that we really want to do if we're explaining blood work. So we don't want to be fidgeting or particularly touching your face too much when you're explaining something that you really want to make sure you come off as being very, very knowledgeable. So, and this is something that that a lot of us need to train ourselves out of. So it's not only just touching your face. I think Bill Clinton touched his face something like 64 times in 30 seconds when he did the, you know, the I did not have sexual relations, that speech. If you notice, he kept doing this because the spongiosa tissue in our nose actually gets inflamed when you get nervous. So even when people get nervous, they can do that, but just, again, training that out of you. Even if your nose does itch, even if you do have allergies, take something, take some type of, something that's going to clear yourself up, or just don't touch your nose. Your nose isn't going to fall off if you don't itch it. Just don't touch your nose when you're in this moment of like, you know, a high intense discussions with people. Another little thing is the fidgeting. So I love to do this, a little pressure point right here. When I'm in meetings, this is my thing. I'll do that. But I actually notice I'll look down sometimes and it looks like I'm nervous if you're like pushing too hard on your hand. So I've trained that out of me, just keeping my hands down or my hands on my lap like that if I'm in a meeting. And then I know we all want to fidget sometimes, but just not doing it, because you look more confident when you're just calm. For students, if I'm talking to them, if I'm like, look, I know you want to fidget, I know you want to do something, do toe push-ups. You know, move your toes back and forth. That's going to at least have you feel like you're doing something to keep yourself active. So another little thing is the belly button rule. And the belly button rule is actually, it's a legitimate thing in body language. And they teach you that your belly button has so much to do with where you want to be and where you don't want to be. So let's say you start a conversation off in an exam room, and the client is facing you and they're engaged with you and they're talking with you, but maybe towards the end of those 15, 30 minutes, you know, that you guys have together, maybe they start turning their body a little bit more towards the exit. You know, their belly button is facing the exit door. Maybe their feet are also facing that way. So it can maybe that they are late for an appointment. They need to go somewhere else. Maybe they're just interested in the conversation. Maybe they had a really, really bad day and they just don't want to be there right now. So it doesn't mean that they don't want to be with you. It could mean, again, that they have an appointment somewhere else, or they just got some bad news right before they walked into your exam room. And literally they just want to go back in their car and be alone. Again, that's where that mind reading, you know, needs to come out, that we can observe without really evaluating why somebody's doing something. Yeah,
I just want to make a real quick comment, Dani, that it looks like everybody's belly button that I can see is pointing forward. So that means everybody wants to be here. So quick aside, but I just had to point that out.
That's good.
Yeah.
Brenda?
Yes.
Not all of us might have symmetric belly buttons, however.
Okay.
Might face its own way somewhere.
Good point. But at least to me, you look like you're pointing forward. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought that was a great observation, that everybody is engaged in the conversation. So our body language is very positive right now.
Yeah, definitely. And even the leaning forward, you know, we all know this subconsciously, but again, what body language is identifying these subconscious things and kind of bringing them into awareness. You know, the leaning forward, the being able to kind of sit on the edge of a chair and kind of lean forward. That's a very welcoming and engaging position that I've always found myself in with clients. And of course, sitting on the ground, you know, as veterinarians, us being on the ground is so fantastic too, especially when there's big dogs. Gosh, I remember this little Pomeranian. I went to the home, and Pomeranian did not sit on my lap, but I made the Pomeranian sit on my lap. So nobody really knew, because it's so fluffy, so you can't tell if they were trying to get out or not. So by like 15 more minutes after, Pomeranian stopped really fighting it. And then of course the owner called me the next day. She's like, oh, she has such good bedside manner. It was so great. It's just mainly because I really wanted the Pomeranian to sit on my lap, and he did eventually. So that's another way, of course, as veterinarians, we can gain that rapport with people, is just by loving their animals the way they love them. You know, and as a hospice veterinarian, how I do that is by walking into a home where there's this, you know, this cranky, old, stinky, yeasty old dog that everyone has walked into this home and said like, oh my gosh, he's still alive. You know, but I walk in and say, oh my gosh, what a gorgeous little boy. Oh, I love great muzzles. What an angel. And when I react to their pet the way that they see their pet, you know, it's again, I mean, that goes further than any body language I could ever have at that point. It's having that verbal ability to talk to somebody and connect with them. Yeah, so we're going to change the belly button rule to the abdomen rule. Okay, Mike. Abdomen rule. Okay. So after that is the feet. One of my friends is a professional poker player, and they actually say that the feet can be more telling sometimes than the rest of the body, because we can train the rest of the body very consciously. So the feet are a very good telling thing. In fact, there was this one study that I read a while ago that said if you If you have both feet flat on the ground, that can be more telling to a positive outcome for both people in a seated negotiation than any other, statistic that they looked at for body language. So basically what that means is that if you're ever in a seated negotiation, maybe you're sitting down talking about a salary with your boss, if you're not really quite sure if they're happy, because you want both sides happy. You don't want the other side walking out and not feeling like they also were part of the negotiation. I absolutely always want that other person to feel like they've been on a good foot as well, no pun intended. Then, drop a pen and bend down and pick it up and look to see if their feet are both flat on the floor, and then pointing, and hopefully in your direction. And that could potentially mean that, that they're feeling what you're saying, you're connecting, you're communicating properly. Then of course in the exam room, this comes out as having, again, both feet flat on the floor, pointing where you're going to be. It's not gonna be as easy for me to show this, but I'll tell you. So another thing also is that when you're standing, sometimes, particularly as women, we'll stand very, 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 very close with our legs very, very close together, maybe even cross. We'll do that all the time. I'll, cross my legs. But what they say is that if you take up space, both just physically, if you're taking up space, you do actually appear like you're more confident. It's just this appearance. I mean, species all around the world, elephants have huge ears. Shamu has that, the killer whales have that big white spot that makes them look like they have a larger eye. So if there's a way to take up more space, you're going to, again, appear more confident. So if you're standing, if you're talking to somebody, if you can have this natural stance, usually, with your feet at least the width of your shoulders, you're going to appear like you are a more structured and more solid foundation than you would if you have your feet very, very close together. So again, it's just a tiny little thing. I remember in the training that I went to, they said, you look like a tiny little candlestick if you have your feet too close together, and you look like somebody can blow you over at any moment. So having that nice, good, solid foundation can really be pretty telling too. So I can go into some more examples, but I don't know if anybody had any questions at all at this point.
I actually do. You mentioned something else about the hands, and you had indicated that what we should be doing specifically with our hands.
Yes, and that's another thing. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yep, yeah, exactly. So Kelly, even if I were to come to you and say, you know what, we need to do blood work on your cat, right? How about if I say we need to do blood work on your cat, or if I say, listen, we need to do blood work on your cat. So this is the supine, stance. And what this is it's an offering. It's a generous agreement. It means we're on the same page. This means like you have a problem, your cat has a problem, and that problem belongs with you. Yeah, I mean, instead of we are doing this together, we are here together, take my hand, we're going to be on this path together. So yeah, that's a very important point too. And even if you were saying someone like, hey, how was your trip last week? Was that good? Like, how was your trip? That means like, we want you better in Aruba. We want you better where you were, or we like you better where you were, instead of like, hey, how was your trip last week? And of course, this is, I'm telling you, I cannot believe how many people, even with people that I work with every single day, I can't believe how many people still point. Even here, even over a camera, you guys are all shaking your head yes, right? This, it's so weird for you to even do this because I hopefully train myself out of this. This is very, 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 it's very scary, right? And even I remember I was at Disney World a couple of years ago and I asked them where the bathroom was, and they go, it's over there. I think these 2 fingers. They're like, it's over there. And now so like last month we were at Disney World again because I just had to ask them, and they go, it's over there. I guess they upgraded from 2 fingers to 4 fingers now. Yeah. But they're like, it's over there. So never, ever, ever doing 1 finger, but always just doing 2, or, one of these, or hey, the bathroom's right over there. And again, in the supine position. So this has so much, and I'm telling you, this goes from the senior doctor goes like this to one technician. Hey, will you just go check that? Hey, will you go check that IV pump right there? And all of a sudden you've thrown them into a bad attitude. I'm not kidding. You guys have all seen it. And it happens like that. It gets thrown into a bad attitude, right? Because they're like, well, who did they think they are pointing at me? I checked that IV pump like 2 minutes ago. They're going to tell me to go check it again. What are you talking about? But if we learn that these tiny little things can just simply change someone's experience of what we do, it reduces the amount of those, negative evaluations that happen. And one of my favorite quotes is, the highest form of human intelligence is the ability to observe without evaluating. Literally observing. So that's my last point too, it kind of goes both ways. You know, body language goes both ways. And I remember I was talking to a group of high school students a few months ago, and this guy was like, you know, I think he's probably 16 or 17, and he had been sitting back in his seat the whole time. He'd been sitting back like that the whole time. And he's like, but I just like to sit like this, and it doesn't mean I'm disinterested. And I'm like, and I'm not telling you that I think you are disinterested. I'm just telling you that some people may. That's it. Some people may. So you have the right to sit however you want, but you also have the responsibility to understand that if you're going to sit like that through a job interview, you're going to appear disinterested. That's it. So it doesn't mean, again, that that person has anything bad or they're not doing something well. It just means that there may be a better way to handle yourself such that you get what you want in life. That's it. So.
Well, that's right on time, because I was about ready to give us, so we're opening it up to questions. I'll turn that over to Brenda.
I'm going to kick it off while you all are screwing up your courage here to ask Dani a question. But I sit on the edge of my chair a lot, all the time. And I've actually had someone tell me once that they felt as if I was trying to escape by sitting on the edge of my chair. And to me, I thought I was acting interested. And well, plus it's just more comfortable for me, but that was my good excuse that I was interested. So have you heard anything, Dani, about that and what that might mean body language wise?
Yeah, you know, and all we can tie into is our own personal experiences, right? You know, so I can obviously just speak from my own personal experience. When I'm in an exam room with somebody, I think that sitting on the edge of the seat, but such that you are comfortable, obviously, and then leaning forward and engaging is a very engaging conversation. Now, that being said, if I was in a conference room and I'm sitting here and I know we have an hour and a half blocked off for this meeting, and we all know that, and you're sitting on the edge of your seat, you know, that may appear like, you know, you may not be expecting to be that long. You know, when someone comes into your house and doesn't take off their coat and they're like, okay, well, stay a while. Like, come on, you guys got to stay a while. So maybe, and I would say that would be so situationally dependent, because I love to sit on the edge of my seat too. I actually think it like just helps me, but I have made the point, and especially with our doctors as well. Gosh, I had to have this conversation with a doctor yesterday. We get like maybe one complaint a month out of 3,000 appointments, like maybe one. So I always handle them. And the lady said, she goes, she never sat down. Literally, this client said this about the doctor, she never sat down. So I tell my doctors, like, if you have to be comfortable, if you're comfortable, you will appear comfortable. And even it goes to something as simple as like taking, you know, a glass of water that somebody offers you. Take that glass of water, even if you're not going to drink it. I don't drink soda. People offer me soda all the time. And I'll say, do you have any water? No, we just have soda. Well, I'll take a soda. You know, but that's again, that way of just incorporating being comfortable. So I think that'd be very, very situationally dependent, because sometimes it could be beneficial, and then sometimes it could appear like you wanted an escape early. That's very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So Jason Coe, who teaches communication, talks about interactions from a shot put standpoint versus a frisbee standpoint. And so shot putting is when we're just dumping information on clients, and the frisbee is when we're more empathizing, we're exchanging, they're part of the, you know, the situation. So how would you compare and contrast what those two modalities of communicating might look like?
Yeah, definitely. And particularly, I could even use this example of breaking bad news, something like that, where you sit down and say to somebody, you know, within 30 seconds of being present with them in the room, I have some bad news. You know, your cat has cancer and it's a carcinoma, so it's not doing very well. I mean, literally, you just go boom, and then stopping it, right? Like, okay, tell me what you think. What do you think we should do? You know, that can be very heavy on somebody. I imagine that like kind of feeling like a shot put versus I have some news, you know, I really want to share this with you. You know, are you open to this? Do you, are you ready to kind of receive this? I mean, I'm really talking off the cuff right now. I know we do a better job in front of a client, but I can see, you know, asking for input, like, do you have any idea, you know, if this would be the kind of decision that you're ready to make now? Do you want to sleep on it? Do you want me to give you some information to take home and read? There's one study that I read a while ago that actually said, looked at doctors that were sued, so doctors that have never been sued versus doctors that were sued two or more times, and these were MD doctors. And one of the things that they said was that the doctors used open-ended questions, they infused humor, and they actually touched the person. And additionally to that, the people actually felt like the appointments lasted, I think it was 5 or 6 minutes longer than they actually did. I mean, you want to talk about creating time with somebody. You've actually created time, even just by using open-ended questions, humor, and then physically touching them, you know, and that's another good point for even the body language part, is touching somebody is the most benign place is either on your shoulder or on your elbow. That's what they always say in business. So you'll see, and people that have that really big rapport, like I love watching and reading about a book over here called Executive Presence. You know, I love watching and reading just about people that have that presence because I find it so fascinating. They say those people, and just watch them, even at conferences, they'll go and they'll pat somebody on the back. You know, it takes so much confidence even to do that. So obviously, I think the Frisbee method is so much better of a way, and I envision that being open-ended and then input, and then, you know, open-ended question and then input from the doctor. So I hope that answers.
On your last point, just really quick, I thought it was really interesting because you're saying about touching somebody. When I was very young and started in business, I was having to present to a CEO of a corporation. And I was sweating so bad. I was pitting out. I mean, I was in a black suit, and you probably could have seen it was really bad. And this is in the old days where you print off the PowerPoint and people had to flip through the PowerPoints. And I walked around to the table because she didn't know where we were. And I literally leaned over her shoulder, and I did as you're without knowing it at the moment. But I figured out that moment, if I touch the person who makes me nervous, it dissipates everything. And all of a sudden, so now I've known whenever I go into a room, if I'm nervous, I figure out who's causing, like it's someone else's fault, it's never mine. So if it's what's causing it, and then I figure out if I touch them in some way, to your point, it takes it away.
That's amazing. So there was another study that I read on this topic that said if a teacher touches the student, they're like 10 times as likely to volunteer in class. Yeah, it's the same thing. So and I've done a couple workshops with the veterinary students where I'll do that. They'll have some type of like event the night before, and I'll go up and I'll touch them, and I'll make sure that I'm actually, you know, doing that. And I'm telling you, it works every time.
So,
just one second here, Mike. I just want to say,
world, and as a man, I mean, to me, it seems easier for women to do that. So how do you recommend a man do that in a situation where it doesn't, you know, end up being weird or perceived wrong?
Yeah, no, I get that 100%. I would say, I say two things. So number one, that two-handed handshake for a man is a very warm way to just convey that. And then I've even had some men that will go to do that, and instead of actually touching, they may just put a hand right here and not actually touch. You know, it's like, hey, it's so good to meet you, something like that, without actually touching you. But I get it. I mean, honestly, and I will, the last good news that I will tell you is that if men, I found that if you just convey a little bit of compassion and empathy, it goes so much further. So I know that you guys are almost in a negative, you know, from just all that stuff that happens. But if you do show a little bit of compassion and empathy, it's felt so much. I don't need more, but it's felt a lot.
so quick, everybody here, we promised 25 minutes, and if anybody has to go, you certainly may. But we've got a couple more questions. Sandra had one. I've got one that came in over the phone. And so I would love to invite you all to stay for the after party, because we can continue this conversation for a little bit longer and then probably get all kinds of additional great information from Dani. So if you must hop off, thank you very much for being here. If you want to stay, please do. Okay. So Sandra, you had a question.
Is my microphone working?
Yes, it is.
Right. So how do you, when people are texting, I had a client that was actually doing some computer work today and had to register at the crematorium, and she texted me and she said, this is awful. And I didn't know if she was talking about the website that she was trying to do or just the whole situation. So I, texted her the website or the situation, and, and I kind of was like, trying to say, how can I help you? But I know that's kind of one of those questions that is so broad that people are like, and then I'm texting too. So I'm like, well, she could interpret that like, well, yeah, make my dog better, make my dog walk, but I can't. So just in the whole texting world, how do we deal with communication in that way? And I know that's not body language, so I apologize.
No, but it is communication. And if this whole veterinary thing doesn't work out for me, I want to be an FBI negotiator. So I love all of this stuff. If somebody were to text me, and just to be clear, she said something to the effect of, this is awful, right? That's what she said? Yeah. So if somebody were to say, this is awful to me, I could see the place where I would say back to them immediately, like the first thing you say back, which is, I am so sorry. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on. So first you empathize, always empathize. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I know this sucks. And even that word, I realize that that's a taboo word, but even sometimes I'll use that for the right client, because it means like you feel what they're going through. So I would empathize first and then say, can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on? Or, and then you try to read her mind, like the website or the situation, or I completely get it. I know this is rough anyway, something like that. But also, so with what we do, we handle, hundreds of calls per day. And particularly with people that are facing the death of their loved one, some of them don't want to get on the phone, but we need them to get on the phone. We actually need them to pick up the phone and talk, because there's only so much that we can communicate via text. So it is very important to get on that phone quickly. I know we're all busy and you can't always do it, but even by saying, I'm so sorry, I am telling you, it takes care of so much. And then she's in a better place to answer you. It's really, and then even when I'm talking about somebody that's facing loss of their pet, if I say, I know this is so hard for you. It's awful. You've been through 16 years and he's amazing. He's so lucky to have you. He got through 16 years, by empathizing, that puts me in a really a positive place for the next thing that I have to say to them.
So can I jump in?
Uh-huh.
Sandra, there's another set of words besides I'm sorry. And it sounds like you're having a problem. Is it with the website or with your loss? And it's neutral. It's a neutral alignment method. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's a good thought, because I went to say I'm so sorry, and I did in my text, but then I looked back and like every other text that she had communicated with me was like, all I'm saying is I'm so sorry, and then something else, and I was just like, and I had asked her also if can you talk on the telephone now? Is now a good time to talk? And I think she was so upset that she was not able to talk on the phone, but I eventually did talk to her, and I think she's in a better place, but we'll see tomorrow.
So it's interesting, because I'm so sorry is sympathy, and what we just heard is that it sounds like is and getting to empathy, meaning it's a version of tell me more, tell me what's going on, so you can understand what their situation is and then help them come up with a solution that works for them. And that's what we default to, though, so many times, though, is sympathy, which is kind of not really connecting.
Human nature.
And I can see that being frustrating, Sandra, especially if you had already said that. So I apologize. You've already said that a whole bunch of times. And I'll look through my conversation with clients sometimes, and I'll realize that, if I take a moment, like 5 or 10 minutes, and write really, really heartfelt, sympathy and empathetic suggestions, then it actually puts, again, the following communication can sometimes, be lessened a little bit. But again, that being said, we all know there are clients that need that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's
so
okay.
true.
That's okay. That's just their path.
Okay, I'm asking a question on behalf of Karen, who could not be with us in video, but she is with us in audio. So her question is,
okay.
hi Karen, hearkening back to earlier, Dani, where you mentioned that you should look up as opposed to down, as a stronger form of body language. Karen said that she was told that looking up even momentarily while she was collecting her thoughts is bad. So just any additional commentary on that conflicting information that she received?
Yeah, so there's been a couple things in the past that'll say, if you look up and to the right, you're lying. If you look up and to the left, you're doing something else. There is that conflicting thing. And really what that is, so I'm gonna give you guys a story with this. So when I went and did my body language training, the Janine Driver was the trainer that I went to, and she's amazing. I mean, FBI, CIA, she has to train them all, the DEA, ATF agents. So what we did the very first day, before anything even started, we had to write 2 stories. We had to write something that was completely true and something that was completely false. And then every single day of the training, we would have somebody on the hot seat, and we would ask them questions. And then we would, at the end of it, have to vote on who, which story was true and which story was false. So this amazing thing, my nose legitimately itches. The amazing thing about this was that I found out that when somebody's on the hot seat, you know, we end up asking questions like, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And we all have different ways of doing this. So sometimes right-handed people will look up and to the right. Sometimes right-handed people look up and to the left. Everybody's very different. So we've been taught that there was a particular way, you know, right brain, left brain, but it's like 60-40 or something like that. You can't predict it. So but what they found is that if you go up and to the right, I'm just going to use it for me. For me, I go up and to the right when I'm imagining something else. So what did you have for breakfast? I have to imagine what I had for breakfast. Or how did you feel about the plane ride you had? Well, how do I feel about a plane ride? Instead of what color is your shirt? You know, if I was going to break eye contact, I would go red. So there's recalling a fact or recalling a feeling, and then recalling a feeling is similar to imagination, which can sometimes be touted as lying. So if you're being asked a fact and you go to your imagination side versus if you're being asked a fact and you go to your factual side. So I think, Karen, that's what you're talking about, because I've had this question before, you know, that I thought I wasn't supposed to go up. But no, it's a normal reaction, and really just watch other people and watch breaking, you know, eye contact up or breaking it down. Breaking it down to me is a more bad than breaking it up. And you do appear to be very, very submissive when you break eye contact down instead of breaking it up. And again, there's no proven, you know, this way, that way for right brain, left brain, imagination fact, but that's all it is. Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions, comments, experiences? It's also quiet tonight.
We are. So I'm going to ask one, because this one, only because we've been doing more videos that I've now understood this. Apparently, I tend to do this a lot. And I never knew I did that. Now, I'm debating if it's because when I have lipstick on or not. However, I do know that I do this a lot. What does that mean?
I'll tell, I don't know what it means for you. I think right now it just means that you probably you just get used to doing that, because you know sometimes when my lip is chapped I'll do that all the time, but it also appears like you're nervous. You know, that's not true. So there's one other thing in body language that says when you don't like what you see or hear, your lips disappear. So where that is, it's like if you ask your spouse, where were you last night? Right? If you don't like what you see or hear, your lips disappear. So you may be like imagining something went bad or thinking something went bad, or maybe that person's trying to imagine a fact when really they should be telling you a fact instead. So that, I mean, that doesn't mean that's what you're doing. Again, we all have tics, but the point is, how do our tics look? What's the subconscious reaction to it? So.
I noticed it when we've been videotaped so much lately, and I never noticed that before, and now I'm uber conscious of it, and I was trying to figure out I'm uber conscious of that. I'm really bad. I am a pointer, and so and I'm also, my hands are often this way as opposed to, so I have everything wrong with the nonverbal.
So this is not bad, not at all. Like, this is not bad.
No, but I usually have them in at me. I don't have them out. My hands are always facing me when I'm talking.
Right, got it. Not altogether bad. There may be a better option, but that's not altogether bad.
I know, but
you need a private session with Dani, I think, Catherine. That's
I know, and everybody. Yeah.
We'll have Dani analyze our video and have her say, like, "Oh, you ladies need help."
Oh, yeah. Mine's the same with me. Just because I talk about it doesn't mean I do it perfectly.
So I do have one final question if no one else has a question. So one of the things that we talked about briefly was generationally. Is the body language changing? Were you able to do any research into that out of curiosity?
There's not a ton of research available. I tried to look this up, and I need to dig like maybe a little bit deeper, but I find it more fascinating that there's a lot of communication differences. Also, it's not just the body language, but I think the one thing that kept coming up over and over again was that I'm 36, so I'm like right at the top end of the millennial generation, but that this generation hasn't actually had any of these trainings. And so I think that's one of the more important things. Catherine, you and I were talking before that you had a boss that required women to have their hair pulled back, if not, shoulder length. And it's just an example of learning how to appear polished, whether or not that's in your clothes or in the way that you're speaking, the words that we're using. or, you know, just in general, just our curb appeal, you know? And I know some of us put, you know, different, not better, worse effort into it than others. But it concerns me when I talk about this newer generation or talk with them, because so many times they have this attitude of like, but this is me. I don't need to change, right? Take it or leave it. This is who I am. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you. I'm just saying you're not also going to get the $100,000 salary you're asking for. All I'm saying, right? You know, so if you want to be worth $100,000, if you want to be the doctor that everybody trusts, that everybody wants to go to, that everybody loves, then just be aware of these things.
Yeah.
And take responsibility for the curb appeal that you have, because your rapport and trust does have a lot to do with it. And Mike, to your point earlier, even about the handshakes, you know, and another question that I've got frequently is, particularly in the older generation, it's not appropriate to shake their hand. It's not appropriate to call them anything else other than Mrs. Smith. So if they introduce themselves to me as Mrs. Smith, I call them Mrs. Smith, you know, absolutely. Even though my preference is first name, because I feel like that's more friendly. So, and that I learned this a couple years ago, you're not supposed to shake the hand of the older generation unless they offer it to you first.
Oh.
So yeah, you know, I mean, like the much older generation, but I wonder, what are these things going to do? How are they going to change and shift in it? But I think that one of them is for all of us to take a little bit of responsibility in telling this younger generation that you can be and do anything that you want to be and do. Just understand how it appears to people, especially when you're in an exam room with clients.
Good point. Good point. Deborah, you have a comment or question?
I just wanted to comment on the dress and the code of dress and talking to people. If you ask them first when you come in, hi, Mrs. Smith, I love to shake hands. Is that something that's okay with you? You can always ask them. You can always, if you're in a conference, like we were at Vet Partners, or where, Dani, we met, I think, at Whippin. And so you ask people, listen, I'm a hugger. Is that okay with you? And it's that way, you know, if it's not, you give them the opportunity to say no, and always leaving that open. And the other piece that I wanted to talk about, I thought it was great that, I don't know your name. Oh, Kurt came up with, it sounds like. That's part of what I do in mediation when I'm reflecting back with someone saying, it sounds like you were really frustrated by that. Tell me a little bit more. That was perfect, because it's not putting the apology there, which is as I'm sorry, Mike said, you know, you're having sympathy. Empathy is different. And so being present and then asking them to tell you more instead of trying to tell them how you feel. You want to hear how they feel. So it's really important that you do that when you're having a conversation. This has been wonderful. I'm so glad I'm here. Sorry I'm a little informal, but today was a busy day.
You know,
You're supposed to be at the Bridge Club.
Exactly.
Informal.
Come as you are, absolutely. And so we're really glad that everyone has felt comfortable coming as there. Sandra, I'm glad your children felt comfortable coming in to wave to all of us. That's all good. Love it. Dogs in the background, perfectly fine. Not a problem at all. At all. So we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes. So be thinking of those last minute questions if you have them. But I love the concept of curb appeal. That's such a great term, I think. And that's something to keep in mind as we all think about how we're presenting ourselves. And I happen to be a hugger, so I probably need to go around asking forgiveness from a whole bunch of people that I've hugged over my career. You need a hug, so.
Or just ask permission, not forgiveness.
And yeah, that's just not in my nature. I know I'm just gonna have to ask forgiveness though for all the people I've hugged over the past, 30 years. But to the concept of curb appeal, if you guys liked this conversation, Dani is going to host again on the 14th talking about conveying confidence. And I think that whole notion of curb appeal really plays into that too. So I'm really anxious for that one as well. Not a sales pitch, just saying, if you liked what you heard here, there could be more explored, which I think sounds very interesting myself. So
Yes.
that said, we're coming up upon the end of our promised happy hour or after party. So any last minute questions? Kirk, looks like you have something.
Brenda, you're sitting on the edge of the seat has something to do with the length of your legs.
That's true.
And most of the places you and I have ever sat down, if you had sat in the back, you'd have looked like Lily Tomlin with your toes up.
Thank you, Kirk. I appreciate that. I appreciate that approval to sit on the edge of my chair for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Well, I just think it's important that you understand. Some of us realize that you're sitting there because you couldn't sit all the way back.
Nice.
And Mike, on your talk about touch, and you and I share a similar gender and a little gray hair, and we are the target these days. I have found that just like with a cat or a dog, if you will reach your hand out close, if they want to be touched, they'll let you know by letting their arm into your hand or leaning into a hand behind their shoulders. And it's normal. I'm a hugger. So I have to really watch myself, especially with people Danny's age.
No, it's true. I mean, because this generation's like, hey, I get to do whatever I want. And I'm like, you guys have got to chill out. I mean,
Yep.
So that's my message to them as well. I mean, just so you know, because I don't like how things get blown up into something that isn't, you know, and take no responsibility for their actions and how they are and how they come across. And I mean, in any aspect, you know, in an exam room, in the back room, the treatment area, anything.
One of my colleagues, and Brenda will know who I'm talking about, but one of my colleagues was a horse trainer. And if you watch him even today, he deals with eyes on the side of heads, not on the front of heads, in his body posture. And he moves, he's highly skilled communicator, but he moves as if he's still moving alongside of a high-spirited horse. And he will adjust his body based on your body all the time. He's always on the move, adjusting to you. It's fun to watch. But I think those are the things, Danny, that you're presenting to us, is that we do respond to how people's posture appears to us. I'm a big guy, so if I lean in too close, I break space really fast.
Right.
So I have to kind of stand back and invite people into a circle that they're comfortable with.
And if you look comfortable, if you're uncomfortable sitting in a way, then that's not going to be a comfortable space for someone to be in with you. But if you are sitting back and, you know, in an arm up, then you all of a sudden look comfortable. And it is. I mean, you watch people at the bars too. It's fascinating. You know, and I was telling Catherine too, I'm like, it's really fascinating to watch a woman talk to two separate men, because the one that she's facing her abdomen to is generally the one that they want. Either she wants to be talking to, or is the friend that she likes better, or it's a gay friend that came with her to the bar that she knows for 85 years. You know, you don't know. But also the people that are sitting back somewhere, you know, and they're comfortable no matter what, you know, those are the people that other people tend to gravitate to, because there is a comfort with them. So I think that's one of the most underlying things that I believe that just we can convey, which is if you're comfortable with yourself and the way that you're sitting, and, you know, then that is going to be a comfortable space for others to be in with you.
One point. Any final comments before we say goodnight? No? All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Dani. Very much appreciated. We will have the answers to these questions, and if you have any additional questions for Dani, let us know, and we'll be sure and send them her way and get all the information to you. So have a terrific evening.
All right,
Thanks.
Thanks
You
so
too.
much,
Thanks, Dani.
guys. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.
And we have to tell Karen she can then exit out. I think Karen may be
Yeah.
still on there a little bit. Dani, I do have one question left for you before we end up getting off. So I don't know if Karen is going to disconnect or not, but one of the questions is, this is so bizarre, and I feel horrible for the two or the three men that are on there, because they're right now they're big targets, right? But I do have a question. At some point in time, and I know Brenda is a target of this, and I am as well, we became kissable without
Agreed.
Does this happen to you too? Like, I wonder, all of a sudden and I don't know how that happened. But then it's this generation, right? There's something about in this veterinary medicine in particular that we became kissable.
Yeah.
And I find that to be the most interesting. And when I look back on it a little bit, sometimes I wonder, with all the stuff that's going on with the Me Too, I do analyze it now a little bit, right? Is this a power trip of putting me in a place, or is this just friendly behavior. And it's very interesting based on who, because it tends to be the most senior executive men.
Yeah.
It does. It does. And now that it was just us, because I don't know that I would say this like with everybody
Wait,
else.
hold on. I'm going to stop recording and we're going to cut that part because I'm just like, oops, I forgot to stop recording.
Yeah.
Stop that recording. Yes.
We can cut that week before we